He walked into the ER bleeding, but they told him to wait. No one asked his name, no one even looked at him. They thought he didn't matter until his mother walked through the doors. She didn't raise her voice, but by the time she left, the whole system shook. You need to see how one moment of silence changed everything. Before we start the story, comment below where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss a new story. The ER lobby was crowded and loud when 15-year-old Micah Bell pushed through the glass doors. His hands were shaking, pressing against the deep cut in his side. Blood had soaked through his gray hoodie, spreading fast. He didn't scream. He didn't collapse right away. He just looked around for help, chest rising and falling too fast, trying to speak. But before he could even take a step toward the front desk, the hospital's security guard stepped in front of him. Rick Danner stood tall with a badge on his chest and a belt full of keys. He didn't ask Micah what happened or where he was hurt. He just blocked the boy with one arm out and a tight look on his face. "Back away from the nurse's station," Rick said firmly. "You can't be here, go wait outside." Micah blinked, confused. His breath came out in short gasps. "I've been stabbed," he said, barely above a whisper. "Please, I need help." Rick didn't move. "I don't care what you say, kid. You're bleeding all over the place and making a scene." His voice was louder now, so people started looking. A few nurses glanced over. One nurse behind the glass paused for a second, eyes flicking to Micah's soaked hoodie, then quickly turned away. A man in a polo shirt holding his wrist was called up next. Micah stood still, swaying, eyes wide. "I'm not lying," he tried again. "I just need—" Rick stepped forward. "I said out. Take that street mess somewhere else." His hand hovered near the walkie on his shoulder. "You people pull this trick every week." Micah's legs buckled. He dropped to his knees right there on the cold tile floor. The lobby noise faded to a low hum in his ears. One woman gasped, but no one moved. A younger man in the corner took out his phone and started recording. Micah looked up at Rick one last time, lips trembling. "Please call my mom." But Rick just turned toward the front desk. "We've got a fake stabbing. Might be high or looking for drugs." Then he muttered, "Probably no insurance." Micah didn't hear anything else. The white walls above him blurred and the voices faded. Everything around him slowed as he curled in on himself, bleeding quietly in a place that was supposed to save people. 2 hours earlier, Micah Bell had been walking home from school like any other Tuesday. His backpack hung heavy on one shoulder, and he had earbuds in, listening to an old playlist his mom had made for him. Mostly 90s rock and soft country. Not exactly his style, but she said it helped her stay calm during long days. The sun was starting to dip, and the street near the corner store was already half in shadow when he heard the girl scream. It wasn't loud, just sharp and quick, the kind of sound that cuts through everything. Micah pulled one earbud out and turned fast. He saw 2 older teens cornering a girl who looked about his age. One held her bag. The other had something shiny in his hand. She kept backing up toward the wall. No one else was around. Micah didn't think. He shouted, "Hey!" and started jogging across the street. The taller boy turned, annoyed, and barked something Micah didn't catch. But the second boy, the one closer to the girl, shoved her to the ground and took a step toward Micah instead. "You want to be a hero?" the guy sneered. Micah didn't answer. He just reached for his phone. That's when he saw the knife. A flash of silver and a burning streak across his side before he even understood what happened. The boy ran, so did the other one. The girl scrambled to her feet and disappeared without a word. Micah stumbled forward, pressing his hand against the pane. Blood oozed through his shirt. He looked down and saw red spreading under his fingers. He could still walk, but barely. There was a hospital 3 blocks away. He knew because his mom had pointed it out once when they drove past. "That's where you go if I'm not around. Understand?" He understood. He walked fast at first, then slower. The edges of buildings started to blur. He pushed through that last block on instinct. The white emergency sign finally appeared like a beacon. He didn't expect kindness. He just expected someone to help. He had no idea he'd be stopped before he even got to speak. Micah lay curled near the entrance doors, his breath coming in quick, shallow bursts. The cold from the tile floor was spreading through his body, but the heat from the wound hadn't gone anywhere. It burned deep, like it was still being carved open. His fingers trembled as they pressed into his side, trying to stop the bleeding. He couldn't tell how much blood had soaked through now, just that his hands were slick and his shirt felt heavy. A dull ringing filled his ears. He blinked slowly and looked up, trying to see someone, anyone, who might care. People passed him. Some stared, others avoided eye contact. One older woman clutched her purse tighter and stepped around him, whispering something under her breath. A mother pulled her young son closer and said, "Don't look." Micah wanted to scream, but he didn't have the strength. He kept thinking, if Mom was here, she'd make them listen. She always made people listen. Even when the school counselor tried to talk down to her last year, she didn't raise her voice. She just stared him down until he handed over the apology letter. Rick Danner stood with his arms crossed, still near the front desk. His face was blank now, like he'd decided this wasn't his problem anymore. Micah heard him say to one of the nurses, "He's still on the floor, waiting for an act to finish, I guess." A young nurse, maybe in her 20s, peeked around the corner. Her name tag read, Clara. She looked down at Micah for a moment, her eyebrows pulling together. She walked over and crouched beside him. "Hey," she whispered, "can you hear me?" Micah nodded slowly. His lips moved, but no sound came out. She reached for his wrist and checked his pulse. Her hand was warm, gentle. "You've lost a lot of blood," she said softly. "You need help now." She turned her head slightly toward the triage desk. "We need a gurney here." But before anyone moved, Rick's voice cut through the space. "Clara, we don't even have ID. We don't know who he is. Don't get yourself tangled in something you don't understand." His tone wasn't loud, but it carried weight, the kind that told people to back off. Clara hesitated. She looked at Micah again, really looked. She could see he was just a kid. His skin was pale under his brown complexion. His lips had started to dry. Her hand hovered near her pager. "I'm not leaving him," she said just above a whisper. Rick stared her down. "You're new here, don't make trouble." She didn't answer. She just pulled out her phone and started searching through Micah's jacket gently, carefully, until she found the phone in his inner pocket. It was smeared with blood, but still worked. She pressed the emergency contact button. Micah tried to say something, but it came out like a breath. Clara leaned in. "Who should I call?" Micah forced the word out. "Mom." Clara nodded, then held the phone to her ear. A calm, clipped voice answered on the second ring. "This is Colonel Avery Gaines." Clara froze for a second. "Ma'am, I think your son's been hurt. He's at Northfield Memorial. He asked for you." There was a pause, then a quiet but firm reply. "I'm on my way. No questions, no panic, just movement." Clara ended the call and looked down at Micah. "She's coming," she said gently. Micah's eyes fluttered closed. His last thought before everything went dark was simple. "She'll fix this." The ER lobby carried on like nothing had happened. Phones rang, clipboards passed between hands. Nurses called out names that didn't sound anything like Micah Bell. Somewhere a child was crying behind a curtain. The man with the sprained wrist was now joking with a nurse, his arm wrapped in an ice pack. And in the corner, Micah lay still, too still. Clara sat beside him on the floor, knees tucked under her, ignoring the way people glanced at her like she didn't belong there either. She dabbed at the sweat on Micah's forehead with a clean gauze pad, eyes checking his chest to make sure it was still rising. It was, but barely. He looked like someone's brother, someone's son. His curls were matted with sweat now, but they looked like the kind that got messy from bike rides and school hallway races. His shoes were scuffed, not from neglect, but from living. This wasn't some stranger from the street. This was a kid who had just tried to get help and had been told, without words, that he didn't look like he deserved it. Clara's hands shook as she reached for another pad of gauze. She'd only been working at this hospital for 3 months. She'd been warned during orientation to avoid situations that might lead to conflict with senior staff. "Let security handle disturbances," they had said. "We don't want to escalate situations unnecessarily." But how was this a disturbance? How was a bleeding teenager, unconscious and cold, considered a threat? She glanced toward Rick again. He was leaned against the reception desk, arms folded, talking to the triage nurse. He wasn't even looking in their direction now. Like Micah had disappeared. The doors opened again. A delivery man walked in with flowers for someone upstairs. Another patient walked in with a sprained ankle. Nobody saw Micah. Nobody cared enough to stop. Clara whispered, "Just hang on a little longer," and placed 2 fingers lightly on his neck to feel for a pulse again. It was faint. She swallowed hard. Then, finally, movement. A gurney from the trauma bay was being rolled down the hallway by an older nurse and a technician. Clara waved them down, but before they could reach her, Rick stepped into their path. "Don't waste resources," he said quietly. "We haven't cleared him. No ID, no insurance. We don't even know what happened to him. Could be a setup." The nurse on the gurney looked unsure. "Rick, he's not breathing right." Rick stayed firm. "We're not risking the unit until admin says so." Clara stood up. "He's going to die out here." Rick didn't look at her. "Then he should have gone to county. We're not a charity shelter." Clara's jaw clenched. She turned to the technician and said, "Roll it to trauma 3. I'll take responsibility." The technician hesitated, glancing at Rick, but Clara didn't move. Her eyes held steady. Her scrubs were soaked in blood now. She looked too young to be this angry, but something had cracked open inside her. "You're going to lose your job," Rick muttered. "I'll still have my soul," Clara answered, barely above a whisper. Micah stirred faintly behind her, a quiet moan escaping his lips. And across the city, a black SUV raced down the freeway, weaving between lanes with a driver who never once asked why his passenger hadn't spoken since she got in. Colonel Avery Gaines stared straight ahead, her face calm but unreadable, her gloved hands folded in her lap. Her son had needed help, and someone had made him wait. That was all she needed to know. Colonel Avery Gaines didn't rush. She never did, not even now, not even when the message had come through with the words "stab wound" and "no treatment." Her mind had always been trained to process under pressure, to assess the silence between words, the meaning behind tone. The nurse on the phone, Clara, had said her son was hurt, that he was inside the emergency room but hadn't been treated. That was enough to raise a storm inside her. She sat in the back of the black SUV, her uniform pressed, every ribbon and pin precisely where it had always been. The fabric itched at her collar, but she didn't adjust it. Her hands were still, one on top of the other, the tips of her fingers pressed into her wedding band like a reflex. Her face didn't move, but her mind raced in complete order. Micah left school at 3:20. Northfield Memorial is 1.9 miles from campus. No call from school. No alert from ER. That means he walked in alone. That means someone stopped him. She had given that hospital's name to Micah herself. She remembered the moment. It was after her second deployment on a rainy Sunday, when he had asked her what he should do if she wasn't there in an emergency. "Go to Northfield," she'd said, pointing to the map on the fridge. "They'll help you." She felt that sentence now like a betrayal. Micah was only 15, still had baby pictures in frames around the house, still left his cereal bowls in the sink and forgot his charger almost every morning. He had gotten tall this past year, his voice deeper, his laugh slower. But he still called her Mom with a softness that made her heart pause every time. And now he had been left bleeding on the floor of a hospital. Alone. The driver cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we're 2 minutes out." She didn't respond. She closed her eyes just once and saw Micah's face, his real smile, not the one he used for school pictures, the one that showed up when he beat her at cards or made her laugh unexpectedly. Her boy was smart. Her boy was quiet, careful, always watching. And someone who thought they had power, had looked at him and seen a problem. She opened her eyes. Pulled to the emergency entrance. Yes, ma'am. As the SUV curved into the roundabout, Avery spotted the chaos of hospital life. Nurses moving patients, a man on the curb arguing on the phone, an ambulance unloading a woman on oxygen. But none of that held her focus. Her eyes found the one person that mattered. Micah lay on a gurney just inside the glass sliding doors, barely conscious, pale and motionless. A young nurse stood next to him, one hand on his shoulder, eyes full of quiet panic. Two other staff members hovered nearby, their movements stiff with indecision. Avery stepped out of the vehicle before it had even stopped fully. Her boots hit the pavement with weight, sharp and even. She didn't run. She walked like she had walked into dozens of command rooms, calm, straight-backed, and full of silence that said more than yelling ever could. Inside, the air shifted. A security guard, white, mid-50s, gray mustache, cheap cologne, stepped forward, his body tense, his mouth already half open. "Ma'am, this is a private—" "Colonel," she corrected. "Colonel Gaines." Her voice didn't rise, but it didn't leave room for argument. She didn't stop walking. "I'm sorry, ma'am, I need you to wait at the desk." She showed him her military ID, holding it steady in front of his face. "My son is on that stretcher. Your staff refused him care. You don't speak again until I ask you a question." The guard froze. The nurse, Clara, let out a quiet breath. No one else moved. Avery walked past them all and placed a hand on Micah's arm. His skin was clammy, too cold. She lowered herself until she was eye level with him. "Micah," she said softly. "I'm here." His eyes fluttered open for a second. A flicker of relief passed across his face. He mouthed something she couldn't catch, but she knew what it was. She'd heard it in the worst places on earth, from wounded soldiers in broken buildings and scared children in tents. "Don't leave me." "I won't," she whispered. "Not now, not ever." Her hand rested on his chest, steady as stone. Around her, the ER staff stood frozen, unsure of what came next. But she already knew. This was no longer an emergency room. This was her battlefield now. The silence in the emergency room thickened. Even the automatic doors seemed to hesitate before closing behind Colonel Gaines. Her presence didn't just shift the energy. It locked it down. She stood still for a moment, one hand still resting gently on Micah's shoulder, the other hanging loose at her side. She didn't yell. She didn't demand. But no one moved. Clara, the nurse who had stayed beside Micah from the beginning, stepped back slowly as if instinctively recognizing that something larger had entered the room. She glanced between the mother and the boy, the way the colonel's body shielded him like a wall, and she suddenly felt ashamed of the others, of the way they had let it happen, of how easy it had been for everyone to look the other way until someone powerful showed up. Rick Danner stood stiffly near the check-in desk, arms crossed again but less certain now. His mouth opened, then shut. He wasn't used to being challenged, not like this. Most people backed off when he used that flat tone, when he dropped the word protocol. But now he was staring at a woman in full dress uniform, polished boots, and 4 stars sitting on her collar like quiet thunder. She hadn't even raised her voice, and he felt smaller by the second. Colonel Gaines didn't look at him, not yet. Instead, she turned to Clara. "Vitals." Clara cleared her throat, her voice quiet. "BP is low, 90/54. Pulse was fading but stable last I checked. He lost a lot of blood before anyone came over. I called you because he asked for his mom. No one else listened." Avery's expression didn't change, but her eyes softened for a moment. "You stayed with him?" Clara nodded. "Then stay. You're the only reason he's alive." Clara blinked quickly, then gave a tight nod. Her throat ached from holding in everything she'd wanted to scream earlier. Finally, Colonel Gaines stood upright. The stillness left her body. She turned, slowly and precisely, until she was facing Rick. The room felt colder. "What's your name?" she asked. He straightened up. "I'm Security Officer Rick Danner. I was following hospital policy. We can't let unknown persons—" "Was my son holding a weapon?" "No, ma'am." "Was he screaming?" Threatening staff? Rick hesitated. No, but was he bleeding? She asked, her tone sharp now. Was he invisible, immediate medical distress? Rick shifted. Yes, but without ID. Then your job was to get out of his way, not profile him. Someone coughed near the desk. A nurse stepped back into the hallway, not wanting to be seen. Colonel Gaines took one step closer to Rick. You left a child, my child, bleeding on your floor while you judged his hoodie and skin color. That's not policy. That's cowardice. Rick's face flushed red. Ma'am, I didn't know he was your son. Avery's voice didn't rise, but it cut deep. You didn't need to. He was someone's son. He said nothing after that. Avery turned toward the main desk. I want a written report of every staff member who interacted with my son. Names, timestamps, notes. If anything's been edited, I'll know. And I want it now. The clerk, shaking slightly, nodded and started typing. Behind her, a small monitor on the wall played the local news. A headline scrolled slowly beneath a grainy cell phone video. Clara noticed it first. Teen collapses at ER door while security watches. Video sparks outrage. The footage wasn't long, but it was enough. It showed Micah staggering in, Rick blocking him, the fall, the way he was ignored while people walked around him like he was a spilled drink. It had already gone viral. Avery glanced at the screen but said nothing. Her face remained unreadable, but her next words dropped like an order. My son will be moved to trauma now. He'll get a full panel, a clean IV, and a private room. And after that, you'll give me the name of whoever runs this hospital. Because the press will come. The military will come. And I'll be ready. No one argued. Not a soul moved to stop her. One by one, staff members turned away, busying themselves with charts and calls, pretending to be invisible. Micah stirred again, eyelids fluttering. Avery leaned back down, her voice calm now. I've got you, baby. We're leaving here whole, and they're not going to forget you. Micah didn't speak, but a faint sigh left his lips. His hand twitched in hers, barely there, but enough. And in that moment, with her son finally stable, Colonel Gaines allowed herself one slow breath. Not relief, not yet, but focus. The kind that comes when a storm is just beginning. Because this wasn't over. It had only just begun. The trauma bay smelled like antiseptic and steel. The overhead lights buzzed faintly, casting a cold, sterile glow over the room as Micah was finally wheeled in. A soft beep echoed from the monitor by his head, keeping time with the unsteady rhythm of his heart. A nurse clipped his vitals. Another worked on inserting a fresh IV. No one said much. They moved quietly, almost carefully, as if trying to make up for the hours lost before. Colonel Avery Gaines stood just outside the room, arms folded, watching everything. She didn't pace, she didn't sigh, she just watched, with that same focused stillness that had made grown men fold in military briefings. But inside her, things were not still. She could feel the way her chest ached, tight and unfamiliar. Not from panic. She'd trained her body to push past fear. But this was something else. This was the quiet horror of seeing your child broken and knowing that the break hadn't come from a blade alone, but from the way the world had looked at him and decided he didn't matter. He could have died on that floor. The thought kept circling, no matter how many times she tried to push it back. If Clara hadn't called her, if the phone had been missed, if no one had listened, he could have bled out while people filled out clipboards and waited for someone more appropriate to save. Her fingers twitched slightly at her sides. She felt the weight of the 4 stars on her collar pressing against her skin, heavier than usual. For years she had believed in the chain of command, in order, in reason. She had enforced rules across oceans. But here, in her own country, her son had been treated like nothing until someone saw the uniform she wore. The door opened slightly behind her. It was Clara again. Her ponytail was coming loose. She looked exhausted. Ma'am, she said softly. He's stable now. They've cleaned the wound and he's resting. There's still some blood loss to manage, but he's going to be okay. Avery turned to her. Thank you. Clara hesitated. It's not your thanks I need. There was a long pause. Avery studied her. The girl couldn't have been older than 26, new to the job, no rank to hide behind, no clout to protect her. You spoke when it wasn't safe to, Avery said, her voice low. That counts. Clara looked down at her hands. I almost didn't. I was scared. He was right there, and I almost walked away like the others. But you didn't. I waited too long. Not as long as they did. The door to the trauma room swung wider, and Avery stepped inside slowly. Micah lay on the bed, his face turned slightly toward the wall. The blanket was pulled up to his chest. A light line of stitches ran just under his ribcage, and the IV beside him dripped steadily. He looked smaller somehow, thinner, softer, like someone who had been trying to stay brave for too long. She pulled up the chair beside him and sat down quietly. She didn't touch him yet. She just sat, letting the quiet settle around them. The hum of machines, the distant voices in the hallway, the soft beeping, all of it formed a shell around the moment. After a while, his eyes opened. Barely. Mom? Her throat caught. She nodded slowly. I'm here, sweetheart. He blinked, tears forming before he could stop them. I thought they were gonna let me die. Avery leaned in then, taking his hand in hers. I know, but they didn't. Because you held on. Micah swallowed hard, then whispered, Why did they do that? Why didn't they help me? She didn't answer right away. She could have said 100 things. She could have talked about systemic failure, unconscious bias, institutional rot. But he was 15, and he was tired. So she said the truth in the simplest way she could. Because some people look at you and don't see what I see. His lip trembled. Is that ever gonna change? Avery leaned closer, pressing his hand gently to her cheek. It will, she said, because I'm gonna make sure of it. You didn't go through this for nothing. He looked at her, eyes red. They didn't even ask my name. That hurt more than anything. He wasn't even anonymous, he was invisible. She kissed his forehead. They'll know it now. Just then a soft knock came at the door. A woman in a suit entered, nervous, holding a clipboard. She looked like someone higher up, public relations maybe. Corporate smile. I just wanted to check in, Colonel. We're deeply sorry for... Avery held up one finger, not to speak, just to silence. The woman stopped mid-sentence, lips parted. Not now, Avery said. We're done with words. And the woman, for once, listened. She backed out slowly, closing the door behind her. Avery turned back to Micah, brushing a curl off his forehead. His eyes were already drifting shut again. And in that quiet hospital room, while the world outside buzzed and scrambled and spun, a mother sat still with her son, knowing that power didn't always roar. Sometimes it waited, sometimes it watched, and sometimes it arrived wearing 4 stars and refused to be ignored. Colonel Gaines didn't sleep that night, even after Micah was moved to a private recovery room, even after the fluid stabilized his blood pressure and the monitors calmed into a steady rhythm. She remained seated in the same armchair beside his bed. She hadn't changed out of her uniform. The dark blue fabric wrinkled under her arms. Her shoulder plate slightly loosened now, but she didn't notice. Her back ached from sitting, but she ignored it. She'd done overnight shifts in field tents and briefing bunkers. This, sitting beside her son, listening to him breathe. This was the hardest one of all. The hospital room had no warmth. It was beige and quiet, filled with the low hum of electronics and a faint chemical smell from the IV tubing. Outside, the hallway buzzed faintly with the occasional wheel of a gurney or the shuffle of rubber soles. But no one came in. It was like the hospital had gone silent around her, afraid to intrude. And maybe they should be. Avery glanced at her watch. 3:37 a.m. Her eyes burned. Her body told her to rest, to lean her head back and close her eyes just for a few minutes. But every time she tried, she saw it. Micah on the floor, alone, curled up in pain. The way his voice had gone small. The look on his face when he asked why they didn't help. Her mind kept replaying the scene she didn't see but knew too well. The way Rick Danner probably rolled his eyes. The way nurses probably exchanged glances and moved on. How long had he begged before someone heard him? How long had they judged him from across the room, deciding he wasn't a priority? She pressed her fingertips against her forehead. She had given her country 30 years of discipline, 3 wars, 4 continents, more promotions than most men in her class. She had taken the weight of command, endured the silence of loss, worn the uniform with dignity. And still, none of that had been enough to protect her child from being treated like a threat. Not until they knew who she was. That was what stayed with her. Not the wound, not the blood, not even the callous words. It was the simple, damning fact, if she'd been anyone else, just a mother in jeans and a sweater, Micah might not have made it. And what about the next kid? Avery stood up slowly and walked to the window. The city lights blinked against the glass. Somewhere out there, people were still awake. The video had gone viral. Her phone had buzzed earlier with messages from old military colleagues, from local news stations, from numbers she didn't recognize. She had ignored them all. Not yet, not until Micah was fully awake. She looked at her reflection in the glass, her face hard and still, her hair pulled back too tight, a crease forming above her brow that hadn't been there a year ago. She looked tired, not weak, just tired. Behind her, she heard a quiet rustle. Micah stirred in the bed. She turned quickly and saw his eyes flutter open. He blinked, confused for a second, then saw her. "You didn't go home," he mumbled. "I'm not going anywhere," she said softly, moving back to his side. He nodded, then winced as he shifted slightly on the pillow. "Still hurts?" she asked. "A little, but I'm okay." There was a long pause. Micah stared at the ceiling. "I heard someone say the video's everywhere now," he said quietly. "Online. They said people are mad." Avery's jaw tightened. "Good." Micah turned his head to look at her. "Is that why you're not talking to anyone yet?" She didn't answer right away. She wanted to explain it all to him, the strategy, the timing, the pressure that needed to build before anything meaningful could happen. But what came out instead was something simpler. "I don't want them controlling the story." Micah swallowed. "What story?" "Yours." She sat down again, facing him fully. "They'll try to twist it, make it seem like it was a misunderstanding, or call it an unfortunate delay. Maybe say someone missed a call. They'll want to move on as fast as they can, but I won't let them." Micah watched her. What if it doesn't change anything? Avery leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees, folding her hands together. "Then we make it change." His eyes welled up again, and this time he didn't hide it. "I didn't want to die in front of strangers." Her breath caught. She reached out and held his hand gently. "I know. I kept thinking about you. If you'd be mad at me for getting involved, for trying to stop those guys." "Mad?" she asked softly. "Micah, I've never been more proud of you." His lips trembled. "But they didn't care." "No," she said, "they didn't. But the world will." They sat there for a while, not saying anything else, his hand in hers, her heart still pounding with the weight of everything unspoken. Outside, the sky was beginning to shift from black to gray. Dawn was crawling in, slow and hesitant, and with it, the promise of something harder than justice. Truth. The kind of truth that forces doors open. The kind that breaks silence. The kind that starts with a boy on a hospital floor, and a mother who refused to let him be forgotten. By morning, the hospital staff had shifted. The night crew disappeared quietly, replaced by a fresh set of faces who arrived to hushed tension and closed doors. Word had spread faster than anyone could contain it. The incident wasn't just an unfortunate moment anymore. It was a headline, a hashtag, a question being asked by thousands of strangers. How does a bleeding teenager get turned away from a hospital in 2025? Colonel Avery Gaines had still not left Micah's side. She sat beside him as the sun climbed slowly through the window blinds, casting stripes of pale light across his blanket. Her eyes were dry, her expression unreadable, but inside, she was still circling the same storm. She had checked Micah's vitals 3 times herself, even after the nurse confirmed he was stable. She had reviewed his chart, asked for the full trauma report, and stood silently behind the doctor while he explained the internal stitching and blood transfusion. She nodded when appropriate, but never offered gratitude. Not yet. Not when what should have been done hours earlier was only done because someone got scared of a camera phone and 4 military stars. Micah had fallen back asleep. He was resting now, not from medication, just exhaustion. His breathing had softened and there was a slight color back in his cheeks. But even as he slept, his brows would twitch sometimes, like the memory still touched him somewhere under the surface. Avery watched that, memorized it. She would carry that image with her. His flinch, his fear, the quiet damage no stitches could fix. A soft knock came at the door. She turned slightly but didn't speak. The door opened anyway. A man in a dark navy suit stepped in. Late 50s, balding, tie too tight. The name tag read Gerald Royce, hospital director. He carried a clipboard, though it looked more like a shield. "Colonel Gaines," he said with careful formality, "I'd like to offer my personal—" "Stop." Avery's voice was calm but final. He paused mid-step. She stood, not suddenly, not with any kind of dramatics. She rose the way she did before speaking to a room full of officers, slow, deliberate, controlled. "My son is sleeping, you can wait." Royce opened his mouth, then closed it. She walked past him and gently closed the door to Micah's room behind her. Then she turned to him fully. "I'm going to say a few things, and I want you to do something radical. Listen without trying to fix your optics." Royce nodded, but he was sweating now. "My son is 15. His name is Micah. He was bleeding when he came through your doors. He said the words, 'I've been stabbed,' and he was told to wait. He collapsed on your lobby floor. A nurse who still had a soul chose to call me. Only then did things change. Not because your staff had a change of heart, but because they were afraid of me." She took a step forward, not threatening, but with the presence of someone who had been trained to speak in war zones and still be heard. "Do you understand the problem yet?" Royce swallowed. "Yes, I do. And we are taking it very seriously. An internal review is already underway." Avery held up her hand. "Let me save you some time," she said. "You don't have a bad apple problem. You have a culture problem. Your triage system, your security training, your blind spots, they all allowed a child to be dehumanized in real time. And if not for a video, you'd be trying to cover it up." He flinched at the last part. "That's not true." "It is," she said. "And you know it." A long pause. "I want the names of every person who interacted with him. Full logs. Audio, if available. I want your entire ER policy on intake procedure reviewed publicly. And I want your word that security officers like Rick Danner are not given authority to make medical judgments based on appearance." Royce nodded rapidly. "Absolutely. We will revise everything. I'll personally—" "I don't want your personal anything," she said flatly. "I want systems, permanent systems, not just patches, not just press releases." He hesitated again. "Will you be going public?" She stared at him. "We already are public." He looked away, adjusting his glasses. "Right, of course, I meant media engagement. I'll speak when my son can walk out of here and see that this place doesn't treat him like a ghost anymore." Royce nodded. "Understood." She didn't offer a goodbye. She didn't shake his hand. She stepped past him and walked back into Micah's room, gently closing the door behind her. The room felt quiet again, like it had its own air, sealed off from the noise outside. Micah stirred. She walked back to his side and sat down. He opened one eye, just barely. "Was that someone important?" "No," she said, brushing her fingers across his forehead. "Just someone trying to clean up a mess they made." Micah was silent for a moment, then he asked, Is this going to be on the news forever? She paused. Probably. He blinked slowly. I didn't want to be famous. You're not, she said. You're visible. That's different. Micah turned his face toward the window, watching the sun peek between buildings. Are we gonna sue them? Avery looked at him, long and steady. We're going to do something bigger than that. He didn't ask what. He just closed his eyes again and finally, truly slept. And Avery sat beside him, the sound of his breathing steady now, already thinking about the next conversation, the next room, the next wall she'd have to push through. Because justice wasn't just about punishing the wrong. It was about making sure the next Micah never had to bleed just to be seen. It was nearly noon when Micah woke again. This time, the light in the room was brighter, softer. The midday sun filtered through the curtains in long gold stripes, warming the edge of his bed. His eyes opened slowly, blinking against the haze. He didn't feel the same sharp pain as before, just a dull ache now, like a bruise under his ribs that refused to be ignored. Colonel Gaines was still there, sitting exactly where he last saw her. She hadn't moved except to change her posture. Her jacket had come off, neatly folded on the windowsill, but her dress shirt was still buttoned to the collar and her boots remained laced. Her presence filled the room, quiet and constant. Micah cleared his throat. You didn't leave? She turned to him with calm eyes. I said I wouldn't. He gave her a half smile, weak but grateful. They didn't make you go? They wouldn't dare, she said, voice low but dry. He chuckled a little, then winced. Okay. Laughing still hurts. She stood and poured him a small cup of water from the pitcher. Sip, not too fast. He obeyed, drinking slowly, his hand shaking slightly as he held the cup. She steadied it for him without saying a word. Has it been long? He asked. Since last night? She nodded. You've been sleeping off and on for hours. Your vitals look better, the bleeding stopped. He nodded slowly, trying to process everything. Then his gaze dropped to the bandage on his side. I didn't even realize how much it was bleeding, he murmured. It didn't feel that bad at first, just hot, then cold. Avery sat beside him again. That's how trauma works, she said gently. Your body tries to protect you from panic, tries to keep you upright, focused, until it can't. He looked at her for a long moment. Is that what happened to you? In the military? Avery raised her eyebrows, caught off guard by the question. It wasn't one he usually asked. She thought he wasn't interested, or maybe too polite to ask about the years she never talked about. But now, in this still room, after everything they'd been through, the question felt natural, honest. Yes, she answered after a pause. More times than I can count. He nodded. I guess. I know a little how that feels now. She reached for his hand, curling her fingers gently around his. I wish you didn't, she said. I would have done anything to keep this from touching you. Micah swallowed. But it did. There was no use in denying it. His voice was steadier now, but his eyes held something deeper. A weight. Not fear. He'd burned through that already. It was the heavy quiet of a kid who had seen the world blink and realized it didn't always blink kindly. I heard people talking earlier, he said slowly, when I was kind of awake. They were saying I was brave, that I stood up to those guys in the alley. Avery nodded. You were. He shook his head. That part, yeah, maybe. But when I got here, I wasn't brave. I was scared, Mom. I felt like I was in the way, like I was annoying them, like they thought I was lying. And for a second, I almost started thinking it too. His voice cracked. I thought maybe I did look like trouble. Maybe I should have waited outside. Avery closed her eyes for a moment, breathing deeply through her nose. Then she leaned forward, gently pressing her forehead against his. Don't ever say that again, she whispered. Not because it isn't how you felt, but because none of that was your fault. None. Micah blinked back tears, but they spilled anyway. They looked at me like I was already a problem. I know, she said, voice steady. And they were wrong. A silence settled between them, thick and full of truth. Neither rushed to fill it. Then Micah asked, "What are we going to do now?" Avery sat back, folding her hands in her lap. "Well," she said slowly, "the video's already made it to every major outlet. Civil rights groups are calling. There's an internal investigation, but they want it to stay quiet." Micah raised an eyebrow. "You're not going to let that happen, are you?" She smiled, small but sharp. "Not a chance." He breathed in, then asked the question he hadn't dared to say before. "Are we going to sue them?" Avery tilted her head. "That's on the table, but we're going to do more than that." "Like what?" She stood and pulled a folded document from her jacket pocket, setting it on the tray beside his bed. It was a printout of a legal template, a policy draft. At the top it read, "Emergency Triage Equity Mandate, Proposal for Public Hospital Reform." Micah stared at it. "You wrote this?" "I started it at 3 a.m., she said. "It's not finished, but it will be." He looked back at her, quiet for a beat. "Is this really going to change anything?" Her face softened. "Not everything, but it'll be a start." He looked away for a moment, processing, then nodded. "You always say use your voice. I didn't think mine would sound like this." "Sometimes it starts with a whisper," she said. "Sometimes it starts with blood." Micah closed his eyes again, not because he was tired, but because he felt safe, for the first time in days, and Avery sat beside him in the golden light of the room, holding her silence like a weapon. Her son's life now a call to action no one would silence. Not again. Not ever. The next morning brought more than just daylight. It brought a knock that wasn't hesitant. Firm, 2 slow taps, a pause, and then another. Avery didn't need to ask who it was. She already knew. She stood from the chair beside Micah's bed and opened the door. 2 women stood on the other side, one in a tailored black skirt suit with a notepad in her hand, the other in a navy blazer with the Department of Health emblem pinned to her lapel. Behind them, a tall man in plain clothes held a digital recorder. No camera crew, no shouting journalists. Just quiet authority and attention that followed them into the room. "Colonel Gaines?" the woman in the blazer asked, extending her hand. "I'm Elise Branner, Deputy Director of Patient Rights and Oversight. This is Marla Keene from Internal Affairs. We're here to ask a few questions about the incident with your son." Avery didn't shake the hand. She stepped aside and motioned them in with a slight nod. Micah was awake, sitting up now, his pillow stacked behind him. His eyes scanned the room as the visitors entered, narrowing when he saw the recorder. "I don't want to be interviewed," he said quietly. "You won't be," Elise replied gently. "We're not here to push a statement. We're here to make sure what happened doesn't happen again." Micah looked to his mother. Avery stepped forward. "He won't be answering anything today. He's recovering. You'll speak with me." The 2 women nodded and sat in the chairs across from her. Elise leaned forward. "We've reviewed the footage. The delay in care. The lack of response. We're deeply sorry." Avery sat down slowly, folding one leg over the other. "You're sorry it was filmed," she said. "Be honest." Marla, the woman from Internal Affairs, winced. "We're sorry it happened," she said more softly. "But yes, the video forced our hand. That's the truth." Avery appreciated the honesty. It was ugly but real. She nodded slowly. "So what now?" she asked. "Another memo? A training video on unconscious bias? A reprimand in a private file?" Elise met her eyes. "We want to change the policy. Not just here, statewide. Possibly federal if we can prove the need." Avery didn't speak for a long moment. Micah turned his head slightly toward the window, trying to breathe quietly. He didn't want to cry again, not in front of strangers, not when it felt like the moment was shifting from pain to politics. He hated how fast people moved on, how quickly something so personal became a discussion point, a meeting, a note in someone's email chain. "Do you want to tell them what it felt like?" Avery asked him gently. not forcing, just offering. Micah hesitated. Then slowly he nodded. He didn't sit up straighter. He didn't try to be impressive. He just looked at Elise, his voice quiet but firm. I thought I was going to die, and they looked at me like I was the problem. Silence, not defensive, just heavy. I told them I was bleeding, he continued, and they told me to wait. The floor was cold, and I remember the nurse who helped me whispering like she wasn't allowed to care, like she was doing something wrong. He blinked, eyes glassy. I didn't think anyone was coming. Avery reached for his hand, and he took it without hesitation. That, she said softly, is what your system created. A boy who was stabbed trying to help someone else, and you made him feel like a criminal. Elise was writing something, but her hands were trembling slightly. We'll make this right, she said. No, Avery corrected. You won't. You'll start to, and I'll make sure you finish. Marla looked up. Would you consider joining the advisory board for statewide hospital protocol reform? We need oversight. From someone who understands systems and consequences. Avery paused. It wasn't about position. She didn't need another title, but it was an opening. One she could use. I'll consider it, she said, but on my terms. No photos, no press tours. You don't get to use my rank as a headline. Understood, Marla said. They stood. Elise turned to Micah. Thank you, she said. We should have seen you sooner. Micah gave a single nod, his face calm but his eyes were sharp now, watching, measuring. After they left, the room returned to its stillness. Micah leaned back on the pillows. You're gonna make them sweat, aren't you? Avery smiled faintly. That's not the goal. He raised an eyebrow. It's a nice bonus, though. She laughed quietly, her hand still resting on his, and for the first time in days, something warm passed between them that wasn't grief or fear or frustration. It was power, quiet, earned, and steady. Because this time they weren't asking to be heard, they were being listened to. The hospital discharged Micah 5 days later. His wound had healed enough to remove the stitches, and though he moved slowly and tired easily, the doctors said he could recover the rest at home. But the emotional weight, nobody had a discharge plan for that. No list of medications, no printed instructions. That part he'd have to carry out himself, hour by hour. Avery stood beside him as the nurse helped him into his hoodie. Clean now, not the blood-soaked one he had worn the night he came in. His movements were cautious. His right arm favored his side, and every time he winced even slightly, Avery's hand twitched with the urge to help, to fix, to make it disappear. Do I look okay? Micah asked, looking at his reflection in the small mirror on the wall. You look like someone who got through it, Avery said gently. And that matters more than how it looks. He nodded, but there was hesitation in his eyes. He didn't just mean his appearance. He meant what people would see now, what they would expect of him. The boy in the video, the kid who became a symbol. He didn't ask for that spotlight, and now it followed him like a second shadow. A hospital staffer waited awkwardly at the door with a wheelchair, though Micah insisted he could walk. Avery said nothing, letting him decide. He moved slowly, gripping the armrest of the chair for balance before standing on his own feet. The nurse stood nearby just in case, but didn't reach for him. Each step toward the elevator was like a silent test, not just of strength but of trust. Trust in his own legs, trust that no one would stop him again, or question if he belonged in the hallway, in the building, in the world that had tried to look through him. Avery pressed the elevator button. Her posture was tall, unflinching. She noticed a few glances from staff nearby, some sheepish, others wary. One nurse nodding quietly, a silent apology in her eyes. No one dared speak. As the elevator doors slid open, a woman stepped out, Clara, the young nurse who had stayed. She froze for a second when she saw Micah, then quickly tucked her clipboard under one arm. Hey, she said softly. You heading out? Micah nodded. Yeah, finally. Clara smiled, but there was tension in it. I'm glad you're okay, really. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, Thank you for not walking away." Her face crumpled slightly and she exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for days. "I almost did. I didn't know what to do, but I saw your face, and I couldn't live with it if I'd just stood there." Micah gave her a small, tired smile. "That's what I thought too. About the girl in the alley. That's why I ran toward them." Avery watched quietly, heart swelling with quiet pride and sorrow at the same time. Her son had found courage in the same way Clara had. Both had faced moments where it would have been easier to stay silent, and neither did. Clara stepped aside to let them pass. As the elevator doors closed, Avery finally allowed herself a long exhale. "You okay?" she asked once they were alone. Micah leaned against the rail and nodded. "I think so. I'm just not sure what home's gonna feel like now." Avery looked at him, knowing exactly what he meant. Home had once been a place to rest, to escape, but now it would carry the noise of the world. Reporters calling, friends texting, strangers on the internet debating what really happened to him. That hospital floor had changed more than his body. It had rewired something deeper. They reached the ground level, and the doors opened to the main lobby. A crowd stood just outside the glass doors. Not large, but just enough. Reporters, activists, a few signs, someone with a camera. Microphones were pointed at the entrance, voices muffled by the glass. Micah froze. Avery placed a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to say anything," she said. "Not today, not ever, if you don't want to." Micah hesitated, then turned toward her. "Do I look weak if I stay quiet?" "No," she said. "You look human." He took a breath, then shook his head. I want to walk out." Avery's eyes narrowed, not in disapproval, but in focus. "You sure?" He nodded. "I don't want to hide. I didn't do anything wrong." Together they pushed through the glass doors. Flashbulbs sparked, voices called out. "Micah, how are you feeling today? Do you plan to press charges? Colonel Gaines, is this going to the Supreme Court?" Avery didn't flinch. Her face stayed calm, composed. She put her hand gently behind Micah's back, guiding him but not shielding him, letting him stand. Micah didn't speak. He didn't wave. He just walked, with slow, steady steps through the crowd. A silence fell gradually, one person at a time, as the group realized there would be no speech today, no performance, just the reality of a boy who survived what never should have happened. A boy who wasn't broken, just changed. At the car, Avery opened the door for him and waited until he settled in before walking to her side. As they pulled away from the hospital, Micah looked out the window, then down at his hands. "I don't feel like the same person," he said. Avery reached over, her hand covering his. "You're not," she said. "You're stronger now." He was quiet for a while. Then he said, "I didn't ask to be." "No," she said. "But you chose not to let it break you. That's something they'll never be able to take from you." He nodded slowly, eyes still on the road ahead. Neither of them knew exactly what the future would look like, but it would not be quiet, not anymore. Because now they had a voice, and the world was listening. The house felt smaller than Micah remembered. Not physically. Nothing had changed. The same soft gray sofa sat in the living room where he had fallen asleep watching movies with a bowl of popcorn on his chest. The hallway still creaked in the middle, and the picture frames on the wall hadn't shifted even a millimeter. But the silence in the house, the weight of stillness made the walls feel closer now, like they had witnessed what happened too, and didn't know what to say. Micah moved slowly down the hallway to his room. His backpack, the one he had dropped on the couch 5 days ago before leaving for the store, still sat untouched. A school paper stuck out of the front pocket. He stopped for a moment, just staring at it. The normalcy of it felt strange, almost artificial, like the life he had before didn't quite belong to him anymore. He pushed the door open. Everything was exactly where he left it. His sketchbook on the desk, a hoodie tossed on the edge of the bed, the poster of Miles Davis peeling slightly at the top corner from the humidifier his mom always insisted he keep running. It all looked the same. And yet, Micah stood at the threshold for a long time, unable to step in. He didn't know who he was in this room now. Before, it was a place where he could forget the world outside, where he could draw, read, listen to music, be a kid. But now the outside had come in, rushed in, without asking, and part of him didn't know how to let it back out again. Avery stood behind him, quietly watching. "You can change it," she said gently, "if it doesn't feel like yours anymore." Micah nodded but didn't move. "It's not the room, it's me." Avery didn't reply. She knew the feeling too well. She'd felt it the day she came home from her first deployment. The world around her had been the same. Neighbors still waved, grocery stores played the same songs, her favorite coffee shop smelled just as it had before. But she was different, and it took months before she could walk into her own bedroom without flinching at the silence. Micah finally walked in, lowering himself carefully onto the edge of his bed. His hand brushed over the comforter, almost testing the texture. He looked around like he was expecting something to be missing, but nothing was, and that somehow made it harder. Avery stepped inside. She didn't sit yet. She just looked at him, really looked. "How are you? Really?" she asked. Micah let out a slow breath. "I don't know. I feel tired, not just in my body. Like everything is tired. My thoughts, my stomach, my eyes." He rubbed his forehead. "And I keep thinking, it happened so fast. Like 1 second I was walking home, listening to music, thinking about that algebra quiz, and the next, I was bleeding in front of strangers who looked through me like I was nothing." His voice cracked, but he didn't stop. "I keep replaying it. Not just what they did, but how I reacted. I didn't yell. I didn't even get angry. I just froze. Like I believed them." Avery sat beside him, her voice calm and low. "That wasn't weakness, that was survival." Micah looked at her. "But what if they're right? What if they did see something in me that made them think I was dangerous? What if something in my face or my clothes or my skin made them—" "No," she interrupted firmly but not sharply. "That's not on you. That's on them." He stared at the floor. "I just don't want to be the kid from the hospital video forever." "You won't be," she said. "You get to decide who you are, not them, not the press, not even me." He swallowed, his fingers digging into the blanket. "I don't even know who that is anymore." Avery was quiet for a moment. Then she said something she hadn't planned. "I almost didn't come." Micah turned sharply toward her. "What?" "That day," she said. "When Clara called, I was in a meeting with defense officials. We were reviewing a supply line compromise in Eastern Europe. My phone buzzed, and for half a second, I thought about letting it go to voicemail." She exhaled, then looked down. "Because that's what I've trained myself to do. Keep focused, stay in control. But something in me, something said, answer it. And when I did, and I heard Clara's voice, I felt this wave of cold run through me." Micah was quiet. "I drove there with a rage I didn't know I still had. Not because you were hurt, but because I knew why you were left on that floor. Because I'd seen it before. Because it wasn't new." Micah's voice was barely above a whisper. "Do you think it'll happen again? To someone else?" "Yes," she said. "It will." He looked at her, searching. "Then what's the point of trying?" She took his hand. "Because it doesn't have to happen to everyone. Because the world doesn't change in earthquakes. It changes in pressure. One brick at a time. One story at a time." Micah nodded slowly, his fingers tightening around hers. "I don't feel brave," he admitted. "You don't have to be brave," she said. "You just have to keep showing up." He rested his head on her shoulder. They sat like that for a long time, and outside the mailbox was already overflowing. Letters, cards, messages from strangers and students and other mothers. Some angry, some apologetic, some who simply wrote, "I saw your story, and I see you now." The world had begun to speak back, and for the first time since that cold hospital floor, Micah didn't feel invisible. He didn't feel healed. Not yet. But he felt seen. It started with a letter. The day after Micah returned home, Avery found a thick white envelope in the pile of mail left untouched on their dining table. It had no return address, just her name in bold black ink, handwritten in clean, careful letters. The kind of handwriting that made you pause, the kind that didn't rush. She opened it without expectation. Inside was a folded note, a clipped article from a small local paper in Kansas City, and a photograph of a boy around Micah's age. Brown skin, narrow eyes, wide smile. On the back of the photo, someone had written in neat cursive, Devin, 14, died in custody, 2017. Avery sat down slowly. The note read, Colonel Gaines, I saw your son on the news. I watched the video. It took me back to my own son. They said he resisted. He had a peanut allergy and collapsed outside a grocery store. The security guards thought he was on something. They cuffed him instead of helping. He died before EMS arrived. They said it was a training oversight. I fought, but no one listened. You made them listen. Thank you. A mother who remembers everything. Avery stared at the letter for a long time. The room around her fell silent, even the low hum of the refrigerator disappearing into the background. Her eyes lingered on the photo. Devin's smile, his dimples. He looked like he told jokes at the dinner table, like he laughed with his whole body. And now he was just a photograph, a boy whose name no one remembered until someone else's son almost became him. She folded the letter carefully and slid it into the kitchen drawer where she kept the important things, the small hidden collection of keepsakes she never talked about, a coin from her father's funeral, Micah's first drawing of a lion, her last field medal. Now Devin joined them, not a file, not a case, but a boy who should have grown up. Later that night, after Micah had gone to bed, she sat in the living room with the TV off, the lamp casting soft shadows on the wall, and opened her laptop. Her inbox had flooded. There were messages from people she hadn't heard from in years, military contacts, activists, strangers. One email came from a retired trauma nurse in Chicago, another from a public high school counselor in Alabama. Many of them shared the same line. I didn't know how bad it still was until I saw your son. Avery scrolled slowly. Every word was weighted. Every message a reminder that Micah had become something more than himself. A symbol, yes, but also a mirror. She clicked open a draft labeled Policy Memo Phase 1. The title had changed since the first night she typed it. Now, in bold, the Micah Standard, a National Emergency Care Protection Act. She paused at the empty paragraph below the title. Her fingers hovered over the keys. She wasn't writing from rage anymore. Rage had done its job. It got the door open. It forced names out of mouths that once refused to speak. But now came the hard part. Systems, language, concrete change that could outlast the cameras. She began typing. This policy exists because one child almost died waiting for permission to be seen. Because countless others never got a second chance. Because silence has cost more lives than chaos ever did. This is not just a reform. It is a refusal. To accept less. To look away. To pretend. She stopped. It was a start. Upstairs, Micah shifted in bed. He hadn't been sleeping well. Most nights he tossed, murmured, curled up in his sheets like he was still on the cold tile of that ER lobby. Avery heard him sometimes, heard the breaths catch, the dreams leak through. But she didn't go in. Not always. She wanted to give him space. He needed to find his footing again. But tonight something felt different. She closed the laptop and climbed the stairs quietly. His door was half open, the way he always left it, just enough that he didn't feel closed off, but not wide enough to feel exposed. He sat upright on the bed, sketchbook on his lap, pencil in hand. The room was dark except for the small reading lamp clipped to the headboard. The sound of pencil on paper was soft, rhythmic. She knocked gently on the doorframe. He looked up. Couldn't sleep. I heard. He flipped the sketchbook toward her without a word. The drawing showed two figures. A young boy curled on a hospital floor, limp, forgotten, fading into the background. And standing beside him, a tall woman in uniform. One hand on his shoulder, the other holding back a crowd of faceless people. The boy's face was faint, but his eyes looked straight out from the page, defiant, awake. Avery felt her throat tighten. "You drew this from memory?" she asked softly. Micah nodded. "Not just mine." She sat beside him, eyes never leaving the page. "You captured something I haven't found words for," she whispered. Micah shrugged, but it wasn't casual. It was heavy with something older than his years. "I don't think I'm going to forget it. Ever." "You're not supposed to," she said. "You're supposed to make sure no one else does either." He nodded once, then leaned against her shoulder. They stayed like that for a long time, two survivors in a quiet house, one building the future with words, the other with lines and shadow. Outside, the street was still, but inside something powerful was taking shape. Something lasting. Not revenge, not rage. Legacy. 2 months later, Micah stood at the front steps of the same hospital. His fingers clutched the edge of the podium, not out of fear, but to anchor himself. The small press gathering was quiet. No cameras flashing wildly, no shouts from reporters. Just a modest crowd. Nurses in scrubs, hospital staff with clipped badges, a few news anchors scribbling in notebooks. Behind them, the community. Neighbors, teachers, students, parents holding the hands of children who looked too much like him. Avery stood off to the side, arms crossed. Not as a colonel today, but as a mother. Her uniform remained in the closet. Today wasn't about power, it was about something more fragile, more permanent. Micah cleared his throat. He was taller now, or maybe he just stood taller. "I didn't want to speak at first," he began, his voice soft but clear. "Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to talk about what happened to me without feeling like I was reliving it." He paused, letting the silence settle. "But I realized something. Silence didn't protect me that day, and it won't protect the next kid either." Some in the crowd nodded. Others simply watched, eyes fixed, waiting to hear what someone so young had to teach them. "I walked into this hospital bleeding. I told a man I was hurt. He looked at me and decided I was lying, or that I wasn't worth the time. I'll never forget that moment. Not because of the pain, but because of how small I felt, like my voice disappeared right in front of me." He looked down at the podium for a moment, breath catching, then raised his eyes again. "But I'm still here, and my voice is louder now." Behind him, the hospital's new banner stretched across the building entrance. The Micah Standard. Equity in emergency response. No one ignored. No one left behind. He took another breath. "I don't hate this hospital. I don't hate the people in it, but I do hate the way things were allowed to stay broken until someone got hurt. Until I got hurt. I wish it didn't take blood to get people to listen." His hand trembled slightly, but he didn't let go. "I'm not a hero. I didn't save anyone that day. I just tried to do the right thing and ended up on the floor. But the people who came after, my mom, Nurse Clara, the ones who stood up when it was easier not to, those people showed me something I'll never forget." He glanced at Avery, whose eyes shimmered in the sunlight. "That we are not invisible." Micah stepped back, the crowd clapping, not loudly, but sincerely. Some wiped tears from their eyes. Others looked down as if reflecting on their own quiet failures to speak up. As the speeches ended, the hospital unveiled a new plaque at the emergency room entrance. It was small, simple, brushed steel, black lettering. It read, "In honor of Micah Bell, whose silence was heard around the world. May every patient be seen and every voice be valued." Micah walked over to it slowly, touched the corner of the plaque with his fingers, then turned to the hospital doors. Avery walked beside him, silent until they were out of earshot of the cameras. "You were brave," she said. Micah looked up at her. "You always say I don't have to be." "You don't," she replied. "But you were anyway." He exhaled slowly, as if a weight he didn't even realize he carried was finally starting to lift. "I still get scared sometimes," he admitted. "At night, or when I see uniforms, or when someone looks at me too long in a store." "I know," she said. "But I'm not angry all the time now," he added. "I don't wake up with it. That's healing, she said quietly. It's slow, but it's real. They walked toward the car in silence, the low chatter of the crowd behind them fading with each step. Micah turned back once, looking at the hospital's glass windows reflecting the afternoon sun. For a moment, he saw himself. Then and now. The boy who had walked through those doors bleeding and alone, and the boy who stood here now, whole and heard. He opened the car door, but before getting in he asked, "Do you think this really changes anything? Or is it just for show?" Avery met his eyes. Maybe both. But it's a start. And sometimes that's all we get. Micah thought for a moment, then nodded. "I'll take it." They drove off quietly, the sun washing the dashboard in gold. Outside the window, a group of teens crossed the street. One of them, a black boy in a denim jacket, looked at the plaque as he passed, then turned to his friend and pointed. They paused, read it, kept walking, but with shoulders lifted just slightly higher. Micah saw them and smiled to himself. A small smile, but the kind that meant something had settled. A thread had stitched itself back in place, not to erase what happened, but to hold the scar with meaning. He leaned back in the seat, closed his eyes, and for the first time since it all began, he rested. Not because the world was fixed, but because he wasn't invisible anymore. If this story moved you, please give it a like. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories coming soon.